Hi, I'm Jeremy, and the beautiful lady standing next to me is my wife, Derry. Derry is a flight attendant. So what does that mean for me? Flight benefits. Free flight benefits. To go wherever I want, as often as I want. So join me on my adventures as I fly around as the standby husband. On this episode of The Standby Husband, we're going to Alabama for some white-tailed deer hunting. Once a year, usually in January, Jared, Derry's son, my stepson, and I fly back to Alabama to go deer hunting. We fly from Phoenix over the mighty Mississippi to Birmingham and then drive 2 hours south to Greenville, Alabama, where we hunt the Alabama Black Belt, which refers to the rich black soil. We stay at Shirling Lake Campground where Derry's dad and nephew have travel trailers parked. One of the things I love about hunting is just being outdoors in nature and watching the wildlife. But before we get into that, let's back up a second so I can explain how this whole thing works. Where we hunt will be referred to as deer camp, which is approximately 1,500 acres of leased land. There are 10 members that lease the land, and each member is allowed one guest. Derry's dad Bill and nephew Kyle are members, which allows Jared and I to go hunting. On the property, there are 20 plus fields that are planted every year to feed the wildlife and draw them out of the thick Alabama woods. Each field varies in shape and size and has a variety of shoot houses, tree stands, and ground blinds. This is the center of deer camp, where the other 8 members stay on property. However, Derry's dad likes to stay where there's RV hookups, because if you don't have RV hookups, that means you're going to have to visit the outhouse, which is what the other members do. You start your day out by showing up at deer camp and grabbing a four-wheeler. You ride your four-wheeler to whatever field you're going to be sitting on. I spent the majority of the week hunting this area nicknamed Buck Field. Last year, I had seen a monster buck here, but didn't have the opportunity to get a shot on him. Within 20 to 30 minutes of showing up in the ground blind, I had 2 doe on the field. A young buck kept showing up on the field and chasing off the doe. Even though it was the rut, another word for mating season, I think he was more interested in eating. Later in the day, I had 12 turkey on the field, which is called a gaggle. Among the 12 turkey, there was 1 male turkey, which is called a tom. You can tell it's a tom by the little beard they have. After a while, I had 12 turkey on one side of the field and 2 doe eating on the other side of the field. Later in the week, before our afternoon hunt, a storm rolled in and it started to snow. Even though it was snowing, we still wanted to go hunt. Arriving at deer camp, it looked pretty thick, but we grabbed our four-wheelers and took off. Along the way, I had to stop and take a picture of the tranquil landscape. Hiking up to my ground blind, it was quite peaceful. This ground blind looks like this from the outside, but on the inside, you can see out of 3 of the 4 sides. While seated in a camp chair at about eye level, the mesh opens in the middle to reveal the outside with no mesh in between. This ground blind costs about $130 on Amazon, and I've included a link in the description. I then sat back in my chair, got comfy, put my feet up on my shooting stick, and just stared out and watched the snow fall peacefully onto the ground. At one point, our 12 turkeys showed back up. They didn't seem to mind the snow at all. We had heard they might be closing the road between deer camp and Shirling Campground, so we decided to head in. It was a little chilly riding back, but What made the ride worse was these cold snowflakes hitting your bare eyeballs. It would have been nice to have some goggles or sunglasses. The snow continued to fall through the evening and into the night, covering the campground in a beautiful blanket of white. They did end up closing the road. We were glad that we made it back in time. The next day it was too cold to go out in the morning, so we waited till the evening. I returned to Buckfield, and while I was there, a young doe and a yearling showed up. I had opened a bag of trail mix, and within a few minutes they could smell it. The yearling became very curious of what the sweet smell was and got within 3 feet. Although he couldn't see me, he could definitely smell something that he was curious about. On my final day, I watched the sunrise over a field called Jimmy's Tower. I spent the majority of the day here into the late afternoon, hoping for one final chance at a big buck. Even though I didn't see a bit of wildlife, I enjoyed just sitting watching the clouds go by. When's the last time you took time to do this? Here's some video from last year's hunt on 3 different fields. On the left, you can see 2 young buck playing. In the middle is a scene from the opening credits, and on the right, another buck walking through a field. Definitely saw more wildlife last year. Here's a big 9-point buck Jared got 2 years prior. He shot him on a field called Baldy at nightfall. We tracked him down, found him about 100 yards away, loaded him up on the quad, and took him to get him processed. By the end of the week, neither Jared or I ended up getting a deer. However, I wouldn't miss it. It's a great time of being outdoors and hanging out with family. Please like and subscribe and hit that notification button, and join us on our next episode of The Standby Husband.